gonna go.
Okay.
I turned off my video because my internet's kind of unstable, so I'm just gonna go without video.
Okay.
Just to make sure. All right, it's on.
Hello, everybody.
What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Yeah, Felipe, video's off, right? So because of the internet situation there, if it gets any better, we'll.
Yeah, I'm just pausing everything. All right, we're live, guys. I expect some of the other people are going to be joining us soon. I don't know, but we did receive a bunch of questions, and I'm going to open them up here. Antonio sent quite a few, and Eric also sent some. Helen also, Jack24 also sent a few, and Wayne sent one here in the chat, right?
Yeah.
Guys, so you guys, we're gonna go one by one in these questions, and if there's time in the end of the stream, we will be taking questions from our viewers in YouTube. And of course, if you guys here with us in the Zoom call, if you guys want to ask anything else or comment on any of the questions that we're answering, feel free to do so. If you've got any additional questions, just send them to the chat, and let's get going.
Nice amount of cool.
So we're gonna start with a couple of questions that Antonio asked. So first, he asked, is there an ideal routine to check on trees and decide interventions, or you just do it when you feel like it? Do you want to take that, Gennaro?
Yeah. Well, certainly not when you feel like it, but sometimes it's when you can. We do have an ideal routine, but we understand sometimes it's when you can. Unfortunately, sometimes it just seems to be, what you always leave till later, and you leave till later, and you leave till later. But if you do get around doing it properly, you do optimize, and you'll be harvesting better fruit. And a lot of the times you see little pests and everything, and it was just that pruning that never happened, that was missing there, to optimize the energy and the nutrient. To as we change the season, I like to manage my areas, trees and everything as the seasons change. I like to prepare for the drought, and I like to after the drought prepare for the rain, and with the rain. So I tend to prune everything down for the drought, make sure, because with that pruning information, you're talking about bringing that organic material to the ground, and then you get you still get a little bit that last humidity, even though the rain might just be fading away. You get the last humidity, so you get those resprouts still, and you cover that soil nicely, prepare for the drought. And then when by the time the rain comes in, things shoots and everything, new shoots, you have to thin them out, make sure you're directing things correctly, because things are really booming now. So when the rain starts as well, directing things in and making sure that you have kept it well pruned, so that as it expands, as the energy is coming in of that sun and that water, it's going in and it's being directed to the right channels. So really, I like to do it as you change seasons, in the beginning and at the end of each season. That's for me like the kind of minimum, right? Obviously in the rain season, you get opportunities to do it every so often. It depends of the amount of labor. Obviously as well, all these answers depend on the species, and if it's fruit trees, if it's timber trees and things like that. But then if you're talking about eucalyptus and other timber woods, or get cut out of that. So it really depends on how much labor how much you can keep on top of that and optimize that. With fruit, often, after the harvest, I like, just pruning, after the harvest, prune, after the harvest finishes with that citrus, after the harvest finished with that avocado and things like that, that's when I like as well coming in and pruning everything. So, get ready for the next year and things like that. What do you think, Felipe? Anything to add?
Yeah, being in very simple terms, you should be checking on trees regularly, right? I mean, every time you're on the field, you should be looking on trees. But the interventions, like Gennaro mentioned, it's dependent on the seasons, and of course, that's going to depend on where you live. Gennaro gave the example of his climate over there in Brasilia, but basically, you want to be you should definitely have interventions in the beginning of the growing season, whatever that is. When there's always, even in tropical climates, you've got a pretty clear growing season, which happens depending on what sort of tropical climate. It could be in spring, it could be in fall, it's going to depend a bit, it could be in summer.
What's up, Jack?
What's going on, guys?
Prune, because that's going to trigger the maximum regrowth, and it will also open up space for whatever, if you need to thin out some plants so that others can, take more bulk, grow more. So that's the minimum, right? This one management of in the beginning of the growing season. Here in tropical situations, you're often going to have a second moment of that you can be pruning trees, because growth is just so fast that often you can have a second intervention some 5 months after the beginning of the growing season, which would be right before the growing season ends, because plants still got some energy left. There's still water in the soil, or decent temperatures for plants to grow after a prune and thinning out. So I think that's a fairly straightforward idea. What's up, Jack?
Hey, sorry I'm late again. That seems to be the thing here.
All right, another question from Antonio. Shall we crack on?
Yeah, what? Yeah, go on.
Okay, so let's check this one out. Antonio, another question. A friend asked me this, and I could not answer him. How many 10-meter vegetable beds would you need to apply? Would you need to supply the veg needs of 5-person family all year round? And he didn't know how to answer his friends. So sorry, to rephrase that. Yeah, how many 10-meter long vegetable beds you'd need to supply the family? All right, a 5-person family. Well, again, obviously it varies, but it's not that much actually. It wouldn't be that much, and because it's all year round, and it depends how radical you're turning these vegetable beds over. But I'll do if you have a good lot of 10 vegetable beds, I think that's fair enough to say. I think that's fair. 10 vegetable beds like that, you could supply all year round a family. Flipping them over every 70 days, depending on what you're planting, 90 days. I think that's fair enough. If you've got 10 vegetable beds, you can have, what you need to do, you need to be planting them, scaling them. You need to be planting, say, every 15 days. You can plant every 15 days, 3 beds? And then how long would you need to take if you're rotating it at 90 days? So so many sets of 3 beds there. And what would you think, Felipe? Maybe about 12 beds?
Yeah, from my experience, if you plant 1 square meter a week, is usually enough for a family. For of course, that's for it's not going to be all of the produce, but let's say the bulk of vegetables, right? So, some leaves, some roots, some flowers, stuff like, lettuce and collard greens and broccoli and carrots and beets. So, just the very basic thing. If you do it like 1 square meter, there's a car passing by here. 1 square meter a week, you can harvest quite a lot for a family. So, you're going to be turning them over every 10 days, 3 months, you're going to be turning them over. So, 3 months is going to be about 12, 13 weeks. So if you're planting 1 square meter every week for 13 weeks, you're going to end up with like 13 square meters. So believe it or not, if you have 13 square meters, you can produce quite a bunch of the food, of the vegetables. And if you're doing a very intensive gardening style that you're, like immediately turning over the bed and replanting after you harvest everything. And of course, you need to have, packed consortium style, 5, 6 species planted together. But just think about this, man. When I was delivering vegetable baskets for families, I was doing 30 square meters per week, right? And I was serving from 12 to 15 families, but I had leftovers. I was only using half of the produce that I produced, and the rest I was trading with other people or selling. So it's really quite a lot. In 1 square meter, you can harvest, like 9 lettuces, a few packs of radishes, 3-4 kilos of carrots, maybe one head of broccoli. So, it's quite a bunch of stuff. So I would say that if you're going about with, let's say, like 3 beds of 10 meters, you can feast. I remember reading, I don't remember where, I think it was some book, but I don't remember where I got this from. But like in some community, in some country in Asia, people were encouraged to have a 4 square meters bed in their home, 4 square meters. And they were taking like 50% of their vegetables from that 4 square meters bed. It's really unbelievable how much you can produce if you've got, intelligent consortiums in place.
I did a online permaculture diploma. I'm still doing it. And I seem to recall one of the early assignments I did, they were talking and they said 50 square meters for a family. So that would be 5 beds. But it would take me too long to find the information. That's just what I seem to recall from that question.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's relative, right? Because I mean, you could want to produce in one bed, you would want to, high density of just beans, so you can harvest some beans. But that could take up a bed, with some corn in the middle. So yes, so I mean, there's vegetables, but there's, if you put a little bit of grains and things like that, and then that takes up more space as well. So it's relative, but like Felipe said, up to a meter. But this is a 5 people family as well, all year round. So.
Yeah, we're talking vegetables. We're talking stuff that have short cycles. Whenever you go into grains, the figure changes completely because the amount of grains that we eat is usually quite a lot. So then we're talking about some thousands or at least hundreds of square meters, so that you can have, corn and beans and whatever it is that you want. But for vegetables, for those, you know, fresh with a very intensive cycle, I think it's going to be about that, you know, from 30 to 50 square meters. If you want to do roots like a sweet potato, any sort of starch, actually, when you go into starch, since it's such a, usually it's such a big part of people's diet, it takes up a lot more space. Also because it's the amount that you produce is a lot smaller, you know, it's just a lot less than vegetables. So for example, if you have 1 hectare of vegetables, is going to produce like 60, 70, 80 tons. It can produce up to that, you know, 80 tons of food. But then if you get a hectare of grains, it's going to produce between, you know, 1 and 5, 6 tons of food. So vegetables is just so much more intensive. So you can produce so much more in terms of kilos per area produced. But yeah, I mean, for the very basic fresh stuff, I would say from 30 to 50. If you want to add other stuff, you know, then you're going to have to go to 100, 200, 500 if you want to have that starch part of the thing as well. Yeah, and then if you want to add fruit, it's another.
We planted many 200 meter square, you know, compacted little forests, and you know, it's a nice size. I think 200 meter square is a nice size where, you know, you can get a little system going on. You can have influence, like with the, you know, you can get your bananas and already your moringas and things like that in 200 meters. A little bit of your roots, a little bit of the grains. You won't produce the grains to supply all year round the whole family, but it would be nice to have. I quite like, you know, the idea of a 200 meter square little forest for a family. Shall we move on?
An interesting comment here from Luke Smith in YouTube. He said, I've heard 4 by 4 feet per person garden space to supply enough to eat. 4 by 4 feet, I think that's about 4 feet equals about 1.2 meters. So that would be about like 1.5 square meters per person. So yeah, you know, we're talking pretty small stuff. But all right, let's move on to the next question. I just wanted to add that comment from Luke. So MRGM asked question number 3, how is successional agroforestry different from syntropic? This is a question many people ask, you know, what is up with syntropic? What's the difference between agroforestry and syntropic farming? And what's the difference between agroforestry and permaculture and all that? And I think it is well to kind of describe what exactly is syntropic farming. You know, syntropic farming is, it's something that came from Ernest Gutsch, right? So he's a farmer and researcher in Brazil, although he's from Switzerland. The idea behind syntropic farming, and that's why the name syntropic, because syntropic would basically be the opposite of entropic, right? So entropic is any process that loses energy over time, right? And then syntropic would be any process that gains energy over time. So basically, syntropic farming is a style of farming that will use resources in such a way that the ecosystem is richer and richer over time, right? So that's, you know, in a nutshell, that would be the idea behind syntropic farming. You know, you're farming in a way that will enrich the ecosystem over time. So you're organizing resources in a way that the ecosystem will enrich by itself because of the processes happening. That's why he likes to call it, it's an agroforestry, it's an agriculture of processes, not of inputs. So we're not enriching the system because we're bringing in manure, because we're bringing in organic matter. We're enriching the system due to the processes happening in the system. You know, all the interactions between plants, solar energy, microorganisms, and, you know, everything organized in such a way to enrich the system by the processes. And then the succession agroforestry is the main tool to do that. So, you know, successional agroforestry is basically doing agroforestry using the succession of species. The succession of species is basically groups of species will succeed, no, not succeed, will follow, you know, after one another, as one group of species will change the environment in such a way that it will make the environment better and apt to receive the next group of species down the line. So, you know, and this is not only with plant species, but animals and microorganisms and all that. So depending on the amount of resources available in the system, you're going to have a dominant consortium of plants, animals, and microorganisms. As the resources available increase or decrease, this group will change gradually over time, right? So this is the succession of species, and it is the driving factor behind syntropic farming, because as plants work, as microorganisms work, as animals work, the system gets better and it gets enriched. It has more resources available, and that will lead to more abundant life species, more abundant plant species, you know, species that are more demanding. So you have this natural succession of species.
Yeah, I just like to recall, you know, how wonderful it is to have, you know, someone now to explain it, you know, so clearly what syntropic is. I remember, you know, when we started studying with Ernest, you know, nearby 10 years ago, when it was still very much agroforestry. He was still teaching agroforestry with that name. And then, you know, he started, you know, talking about it's syntropic farming, and it blew everyone away with what is syntropic? And then, you know, people were giving courses and they were having to ring in, and she's like, I don't understand. Do you want me to call it syntropic? Or do you want me to call it? You need to explain it to us. And it was so difficult to actually put it into words initially. I mean, for us to get our heads around what, you know, but yeah, I mean, quite simply put, yeah, like Felipe very well said, it's agriculture of processes, a process that triggers other processes that enriches. So that was it. I mean, very well said. I just find it amusing at the time how people, it took quite a while, you know, for people to get their heads around it, to be able to put it into these simple words like Felipe just has. Because you never know what the old man's thinking.
Cool. Yeah, I hope it's clear. And if there's any further questions, you know, just questions which they send to us in advance.
Yo, Felipe, it's cutting out. You want to repeat that?
Stream, if there's time. Yeah. I'm in the YouTube comment section. If the question, and I'm saying, yes, you can ask a question, but we're going to take YouTube questions in the end after we've addressed all of our patrons' questions, which they have sent to us in advance. So just so he knows how it works. So on that, moving on to the next question by Amar GM as well. He asked, in your experience, do avocado, cacao, jaboticaba grow in semi-arid regions with high temperatures being 38 degrees Celsius in summer and low being 12 degrees Celsius in winter? Yes. Oh, just in case you need it, cactus is not grown naturally in the region, but some people plant agave as a fence. Okay. Look, cacao comes from from the tropical rainforest from the Amazon, so it needs quite a lot of water. Asking cacao to grow in the semi-arid without irrigation is quite a bit of a stretch. Jaboticaba will grow as long as you give decent conditions for it.
Yeah, we're cutting there, Felipe.
About 2 centimeters tall. after it sprouts. Yeah, sorry.
I think
What's
you
the last thing that you heard?
after the jabuticaba. The jabuticaba will grow if you
Yeah,
give
right.
it condition.
Yeah, if you give it conditions, and ideally you want to plant it by seeds directly on the soil, because it has such a strong taproot, which will, when it grows very slowly, and it's going to be, when it's like 2 centimeters tall, 3 centimeters tall, very, very small, its root will already be like 10 to 20 centimeters deep.
All right.
A deep taproot.
Well, this is it, guys.
Did you get the message, or did I cut again?
No, we got the taproot. As it's 2 centimeters tall, it will be a good 10, 15 underneath, but it cut from there. Everyone bear with us because we're out in the farms and things like that. A bit far out. We know the avocado certainly does grow well in those conditions there. Cacao will be a little bit harder in the semi-arid. All right, I think it looks like we've lost Felipe temporarily.
No, I'm here.
All right.
I'm here. Yeah, the avocado, it depends on how much semi-arid we're talking about. If it's like, if we're talking 300, 400, 500 millimeters of water, it is a bit of a stretch also to have it without irrigation. But, when you up to 700, 800 millimeters, then it's easier. But of course, when you have irrigation, everything changes. Then it is the perfect place to plant all these things. You want to take the next one, Gennaro?
Yeah. Gennaro, I believe, grows his produce organically. So initially, when the system is establishing, how do you manage pests and insects? There is no balance yet, right? And when tomatoes and greens, for example, have holes, they can't be sold. So what are you using to manage these organically? And do you buy organic pesticides from the market or prepare something within the farm? Just give us some ideas, please, on this, because I believe to be sustainable, we have to try and make things within the farm rather than buying it externally. All right. Well, I work with several friends, and people have different styles, people do different things. I have purchased a lot of organic pesticides from the market already in the past. I'm out of that game now. Well, most of it is produced by Bayer and other big corporations. So there's that aspect of it. There's an economical aspect of it as well, where you're actually having to spray these things, and when you get into the spraying, it's like every other day you got to spray something. You're going down that line, you get your little cocktails of sprays, and then you get recommended this and recommended that, and then you find yourself in a routine where you're like taking turns every day spraying something else. It's a bit tedious, really. And I understand that you're actually causing an imbalance yourself once you're eliminating something from the system. If I'm actually fighting against something, because that same spray, that might be fighting off that bug is also going to be repelling, ladybugs that would in turn eat that. So really, I feel like it's a dead end when you go down that line of spraying things, whether it's organic or not. So I really strongly don't use it. I understand the question is what he's saying, but what happens initially? Because initially you're in an unbalanced system. So yeah, so you're going to take a bit of a knock. With organic farming already, people already say, up to 30% is an acceptable margin. And I agree with that. I'm okay with taking that cut, taking that hit. But do understand that you've made savings as well, where you've not purchased anything, you've not spent time, making all the stuff, and you've not spent time spraying it, and then you've got all the spraying equipment that every year you need to be replacing and repairing and things like that. So, I mean, really, initially, if you can start with a lot of organic matter and very high density consortium, you very quickly bring a balance to the system. Most of the, ants and things like that, they will be working that decaying organic matter on the soil. That material that's in the soil is going to be, more tasty to them. So that will already deal with so much because already if you're bringing in, enough mulch, already you've set up a system similar to what nature would have done. So already, your insects already working that soil, working that organic matter. And with the abundance of a consortium, everyone's actually now working and doing what they do. And then it brings health to the system, and then the system is just vigorous. And then, pests, they tend to attack, a given plant that has probably an insufficiency nutritiously wise. It's probably not a healthy plant. It probably hasn't got all the minerals or the nutrition it needed. That gives the information for the pests to come in and take advantage of that. So, I mean, if you develop healthy systems, when, you haven't got that mulch, you have to do something simpler, you pay the price. You pay the price initially, but already plants with very, very high density and be in peace with that 30%, knock. And do appreciate that you've actually spent less money, because this is big for me, labor. Labor is big, big, big. So even if this sprays, even if this sprays wasn't causing an imbalance in itself, the labor to be doing this. So if you can balance it out, or if you can be all right with a certain amount of loss, that kind of pays for itself. Because when you go down the line of spraying things, trust me, you're gonna have a cocktail of things to spray. It's not just gonna be one thing or the other. If you believe in that route, every time you go down there, you're gonna have, a different product that they're trying to sell you. These big companies trying to sell you. I was actually in a meeting with these people, the organic certification, because we visit farms and we certify people for the organic, certificate. And then, this one guy has asked to take part in the meeting because he represents this company and he wants to introduce to us all the new technologies. I had to interrupt and I had to say, excuse me, but just so everyone be very careful with this, because then you always have a new technology. This guy's actually trying to sell you a package, right? You spray this, and 15 days later you spray that, and then with 60 days you spray this, and then you're gonna be cool. It's like, oh my God, and then next month there's a new technology, and it's just, the technology of the planet Earth exists, and it's just natural, and like we always say, nature looks after itself. We just, like Felipe well said in our live webinar earlier this week, the best thing we can do is not cause any mistakes. It's not all the right things. What can we do correctly? Is how many wrong things should I avoid doing? So as the less you interact, let nature look after itself, and things do balance out. Just be true to consortium and things like that, and mulch that goes along, and bringing health to the system.
Also, just to add to that, definitely using pesticides and herbicides and any side. The problem with that is that it goes directly in the opposite direction of what we want to achieve, right? Because you are selectively killing a part of the system, because you're going to be killing out some animals, some insects, and that's always going to further the imbalance of the system. So what you should do, And I understand that, everybody's starting out in degraded lands, so the system is completely not balanced. Plants are not healthy. So what you should do in the beginning, especially when you need to establish a commercial system and you're going to want to have plants that are demanding, because all of the plants that we eat, they are highly demanding plants in terms of soil quality. What you should do is you fertilize them properly. Okay, you take good care of the nutrition of the plants in the beginning, right? So do it properly. Use manure, use lime if you have to, use rock dust, use micronutrients. You should use everything that plants need to be. And every pest attack, every disease attack is preceded by a mineral deficiency. Okay, this is well established. There is no attack in plants that are not preceded by a mineral deficiency. So what we do when we're balancing out the soil system over time with agroforestry is that we're balancing everything out in a way that plants and microorganisms
Yeah, you cut out then.
Yeah, I was just saying that, after we work with agroforestry for a few years, things are going to balance it out, and the soil is be able to nourish the plants with everything they need. But in the beginning, when we're starting with the graded soil, it's really important to try to give that mineral nutrition to plants really well. So, the minimum you need to do is manure, lime if needed, / rock dust. Rock dust could substitute lime, and micronutrients. This needs to be in your starting point, especially if you're working with highly demanding plants like vegetables and fruit. If you're doing stuff like raising animals and doing pasture stuff, you can be a lot less picky about the type of fertilizer that you're using. But for vegetables and fruit production, I highly recommend decent nutrition from the very beginning. And then as the process evolves, you're not going to have to be doing this over time. But for the beginning, it's really important to have decent nutrition. Question 6, I think it kind of follows up on the same kind of idea from Amar GM as well. He asked, there was a debate on one of the groups, planting fruit trees in an orchard style gives maximum yield instead of planting them among other service trees like in syntropic, where it has to compete, at least initially, and impact its future size and yield. What are your thoughts? Look,
Well,
it's very simple that I believe that monocultures can be more productive than our syntropic systems, and that might come as a bit of a shock that I'm saying that. But monocultures, that doesn't mean that they're better. They're more profitable, and that they're better just because they're more productive. Because they're highly dependent on inputs, and they're very expensive to maintain, and they are not sustainable long term because they will inevitably degrade the soil. So sure, you can get high yields, but at a very high cost. And because you're putting in lots of fertilizers, so you're basically feeding the plants, you're putting food in their vein, you're basically using anabolics so that everything works out and you get your crop. So I actually wouldn't doubt if we actually found out, scientifically that yes, monocultures can produce more, but at what cost? We have to look at the cost benefit in the end, and we cannot look at the yield from 1 year, because when I say that monocultures probably can get higher yields, that's for a specific year. But then it's very common in monocultures that you lose some years, like, oh, this year we had a pest attack, so we lost everything, and then the other year we had a enormous yield that set the highest record, and then the next year you lose again. So when you look, when you look at things on a longer term base, then things change dramatically. And even in the short term base, you need to think about the cost benefit of it all. So in a syntropic system, when you're creating all that soil and everything, you're going to have a lot less risk, a lot less problems with diseases. Plants are going to be healthier overall. You're going to have higher quality of product. So yeah, I think that's it. Talking about productivity only, sure, I think monoculture can be more productive. But when you take everything into account, quality of product, risk, health of the plant, cost, I think there's no doubt that syntropic farming takes the lead in that.
Yeah, and there's several things here. I mean, we're talking about with syntropic farming, we have multiple harvests as well. So in a main crop, sure, as well. But then you have secondary crops and some of that some of those service plants can be cash crops as well. And when we're talking about competing, I don't think there's, we call it a warm competition. The term we use is a warm competition, where it's actually cooperating. I see service crops, I don't see them as competing. I see them as cooperating, aiding. I love using service crops that it's got to nurture my seedlings. They're got to, give them condition to withhold, heavy rains and heavy sun and days of no rain. And, so I see service crops as cooperation. They're there to cooperate and they're there to stimulate as well. And I notice a lot of stimulation that these service crops can give, I love the classic examples is the papayas with say the mahoganies, or things of this sort, where the papaya is shooting up as an emergent plant, and the mahogany, he's not from the understory, so he's rushing, he's running, chasing him to overtake that, to not to be left behind. So just in that term where we're talking about competition, where it's competing, at least initially, I rarely see it as competing. It's going to compete maybe if you don't manage that service crop, if you don't prune that secondary crop or that service crop at the right time, or remove it or chop to drop it and things like that, right? But it's cooperation, and it is a competition, but it's a warm competition where it stimulates growth. It stimulates, other plants to achieve, its stratas and its, and how many benefits, so to be honest, when we're talking about service crops, benefits all around.
Now let's move on to Eric's questions. Eric asked, normally moringa and castor beans are biomass plants to feed the system and thus the main crop. What if moringa and castor beans are the main crop? What kind of biomass plants do you advise? So one thing about service plants, I think there are two very important characteristics for service plants that we want to look for. First of all, they should not occupy the same stratum and succession stage of your main crop, right? So, we're talking about castor beans. We have a placenta plant. It's a plant that's going to last one year, 1 year and a half. And it's an emergent, high to emergent plant. So you don't want to have any other plant occupying that same moment, right, in time and space as the castor beans. You want to have that stratum free up for the castor beans, right? So this is one point. You don't want to have it another plant, a service plant that's going to be occupying that same spot. The second thing, you ideally want your service plant to be less demanding than your main crop. So you want to have something that will grow more easily than your main crop, because that means it's gonna It's going to be mobilizing nutrients and associating with microorganisms that your main crops will not, and that will, it's going to be.
Sorry, just cut off there, Felipe. All right. All right, we'll see if he comes back. Eric, you went on to say, the normal space for a tree bed is about 4 to 5 meters. If moringa and castor beans are the main crop in tree beds, can you space the tree beds closer to each other, about 2.5 meters? I personally think you can. I think you can have moringas in 2.5 meters away from each other, especially because they grow so fast and you can already be cutting them down after, 18 months, a year later. You don't need to let them become big monsters. You can be harvesting them very quickly, and that means pruning them radically. And if you do that, I mean, when you're talking about the biomass production, I can't help to think, of a system where you have corridors, So if you've got 2.5 meters, you can have those kind of like 2 meter, kind of roads with the grass, right? I think a grass would work very well for this kind of system, where you have, a row of grass, and then your tree bed, a row of grass and your tree bed, and you can get those micro tractor, very small micro tractors. I don't know the scale. I think your scale in your house personally is not that large. You probably can deal with, but I don't know what kind of areas you're thinking of planting. But I'm thinking, lines of grass, and that's going to be under the castor bean as well. So you're not occupying that strata. And with very simple little micro tractors, you can be coming in and cutting that and dropping that, things like that. What do you think, Eric? You want to say something?
Yeah, that's what I also have in my mind. But I want to ask for sure, because I don't have any experience with a system like that. So, normally I learned 4 or 5 meters a bed, but I thought just what you say, it grows so fast that you can cut it every 18 months. So then you can space it, and I space it. Space it with many, with not so many space for distance, and the grass. I think it's a good idea. Yeah, and it's also an option to blend it with the lemongrass, or that's also a good thing to plant. Or I think so. Because last week you in the YouTube, I heard something about the you have a live chat or a live last week, and you told also something about the lemongrass. So it's good to replace the grass for and put lemongrass. It's a good option. Or didn't I?
Well, I mean, personally, if I understand if you want to have it as a crop, because sometimes your service crops can be a cash crop and that might work. But personally, I'd want to use something that's a little bit more aggressive, in terms of biomass, because then if this is going to feed your system,
yes,
personally, I'll be thinking of something a little bit more aggressive.
Yeah.
And and if you do have a 2 meter corridor with grass, you can also fit things in there, because if it's 2.5 meters away from each other, you can still fit, things like your pigeon peas, even though that's going to have like a similar strata to the castor bean, but you have the 2.5 meters away, so you can still have another little chop and drop something there. I've got systems where they're just conventional, they look like vegetable beds, where they 90 centimeters, and 20, 25 corridors. And it's just one grass, one tree, one grass, one tree, one grass, one tree. So that's even closer than 2.5 meters, right? And you know, it's worked out fine. It's worked out fine where every other bed is one for mulching, one for crops, one for mulching, one for crops, one for mulching. If you have a 2-meter corridor, and you know, depending on the size of the system, it'd be really nice to get a little micro tractor, one of those, you know, one of those grass cutters in the front. A lot of them just cut and already throw to the side, and it's just so convenient.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I saw one of your videos of the Agroforestry Academy. I saw you doing that with I think it's brachiaria.
Yeah, it's the brachiaria. Yeah, it's the brachiaria. The brachiaria doesn't like too much shade, but then again, you know, the moringas is not going to give that much shade. You know, it's not that complex. You know, obviously the Mombasa is the champion in most cases that I've worked with, but then it's also more demanding, and we lost Felipe there when he was saying about, you know, you want it to be less demanding because castor beans are not demanding, you know, they're really not demanding at all. So, you know, if I want to be in line with what Felipe was saying, that your service crop needs to be less demanding, but I mean, I suppose it's in a different bed, isn't it? Like it's in the corridor, so I don't know if there's a direct relation to what's happening in that vegetable, in that bed with the castor beans.
Yeah.
Is Felipe back? Do you want to add anything, Felipe?
Yeah. Well, I'd like to say that it is a mistake to think that castor beans are not demanding. I know that they grow around as weed a lot, but when you're talking about production and you want them to grow, I mean, you want to have them as a cash crop. I mean, they grow in the best lands of Brazil. They're only commercially grown in the best soils of Brazil. So they're very tolerant to drought, so they don't need much water. But in terms of mineral availability, they need quite a bit, so they won't grow in very poor soil. You know, they might grow, but then they get all skinny. You know, for you to have strong, vigorous plants, you need pretty decent soil. I just wanted to add that. But one thing that I would say is that I would put castor beans and moringa in different rows, because castor beans is an emergent plant, and moringa is, you know, it's kind of high. They're very close in terms of stratum, and they both grow so fast. And, you know, the castor bean is going to stall its growth when it starts flowering. And that's, you know, in a couple of months, it's already flowering. The moringa will quickly catch up to it, and it might become a bit overshaded, you know. So I would put them in different rows. But I think we could easily add Mombasa in between the rows, like Gennaro mentioned. I think it's a great thing to have grasses in between the rows, so you could have maybe rows even closer apart. I don't know, maybe 1.5 meters, and then you have one castor beans, one moringa, one castor beans, one moringa, and you have some grass in between for you to be cutting back and mulching, something like that. Because I think it's gonna get way too clogged up if you have both of them in the same bed, you know, in the same row. Might be a bit of a, and you want to harvest castor beans. If you were just pruning castor beans, fine, no problem, because then once it flowers, you just cut it back and you let the moringa grow. That's just what I wanted to add. And I think, you know, add also to the grass lots of legumes, you know, jack beans. You can have pigeon pea. Pigeon pea will work.
Yeah, we lost you again there, Felipe.
Moringa.
Cool, back.
What?
Yeah, it was cutting, sorry. But we got the gist. You can
I was just talking about the pigeon pea. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, but that's cool. That's what I the idea. You guys want to move on to the next question or anything else about this one?
Moving on.
All right, we can move on. Helen asked, I'm interested in all things cashew. I would like to know more about how you design them into the systems there, Felipe. You have some at different ages right now. How they are evolving and what your plans are for the management, rolling the systems and harvesting. I plan on planting areas in Guinea-Bissau in a few months' time, and a focal crop will be cashew. And we are really trying to demonstrate how to do things different from the expanding monoculture there, similar to Mozambique. All right, so cashew is a pretty amazing plant, and it's just to give a bit of a like the profile of the plant, right? Cashew is a high stratum plant. It's quite long lived. You know, it's gonna live for dozens, maybe even over 100 years, and it can start bearing fruit quite early on, like in 5 to 5 years if planted by seed. So it's quite interesting because it starts to bear pretty early if it's in a decent, you know, good place for it, and it can live for a very long time. So one thing that I highly recommend that I have been doing is to, you know, plant lots of cashew by seed, even if you plan on having grafted varieties, but just plant them by seed because it has such a robust, it always goes back to that, all right? The idea of having robust root systems. So whenever you plant something by seedling, you lose that robust root system. So you want to plant it by seed in high densities, and then you graft it on the field. One of my experiences in Mozambique is that cashew grows so fast in sandy soil, and you know, you can have cashew in 10 months, you know, almost 2 meters tall. So it's almost like you can have a little forest of cashew in under a year, just by planting them in very high densities. And then you can have all sorts of medium and lower strata plants with it. Cashew goats and sheep grazing under cashew is pretty amazing. In Mozambique, it's very common in people's backyards. They have cashew with coconut as the emergent to cashew. You know, so you've got coconuts on the emergent layer, cashew on the high layer, and then you've got stuff like citrus and all sorts of annona species. So, you know, stuff like sugar apple and all of its family on the understory of cashew. So, you know, that's going to work very nicely. I think these are some very important aspects. Coconut, it's a must. Cashew loves to be with coconut. Coconut, you know, very nicely opens up its leaves on top of the cashew canopy once it's over there. So it's I think these are a few crops that you could be adding to it. And of course, since
cutting out there, Felipe.
You can have all sorts of annual crops growing with it to have an initial harvest until the cashew starts bearing at between 3 to 5 years, you know, depending on variety and if it's grafted or not. Cassava, definitely use cassava. I don't remember where, but recently I was somewhere where people were exactly saying that they've been trying to establish cashew fields, and they weren't able to establish because the cashew plants would die. They were seedlings, and then they started planting it with cassava, consortiated with cassava, and only the cashew plants that were consortiated with cassava would live. Oh yeah, this was in the semi-arid here in Brazil, in a city called Banzai. So definitely have those initial annual plants going along with it to help with its initial growth. All right, let's
Cool.
move on to Jack's questions.
Yo,
Janelle, you want
Felipe.
to start on that? Yo.
Sorry, no, I know we're live and everything, excuse me, but just in case, you probably have your YouTube open there, right? And you know, with the resolution, you can set it to the very minimum resolution. That might help with your internet connection if you haven't done so. Because sometimes, you know, you actually stream like in a higher resolution, and you know.
Yeah. Okay. I just switched to minimum resolution.
That might
the
help
important
a
is
bit,
the
right?
audio anyway.
Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Good one.
Cool, cool. All right, we got a question from Jack. Is there a standard? What's that? Yo. All right.
Go on, man.
Yeah, sorry. I'm gonna go ahead. Is there? Sorry, got my little Adobe pop-ups here. My pirate editing things. All right. Is there a standard process you go through when designing an agroforestry system on paper? I assume you start with the primary crops in its standard monoculture spacing. Then do you add a secondary crop? Then support species? Could you talk us through quick design as an example? When planting trees and adding manure to the whole, that's the next part of the question, right? Well, Jack, we do just that. We decided, you know, the main crops and things like that. But, you know, once you draw the system and you're sure that this is it, you know, you go to sleep. I'm just, you know, personal experience. You go to sleep and wake up and it changes. And then you go and, you know, you're at the seedling shop and then you see an opportunity for, you know, something else. And then it changes again. And then, you know, you're online shopping for seeds and then it changes again. And then the season, and then you got great seeds. I'm just to bring you in on how many times it changes until the actual day you plant from when you actually design the system. Usually this is what I find. And it's every time you change it, it seems to be so clear, you know, this is it, I've got it now. But, you know, next thing you know, and then till the day you're planting and you've got your system there, but then when you actually go plant it and you put it there and you're like, you know what, I can fit something else here. And then it changes again. So it's very much like, you know, when you draw the system out, you know, be open to, you know, adapting until it's actually done. You know, it's not set. You know, once you got the project on paper, it doesn't mean, you know, this is it and you can't alter it. It seems to be ongoing until the day you actually finished planting, and then you've planted all your main crops, and then you're still coming up with more ideas for like other service crop opportunities. So what I'm saying is it's quite dynamic, and I find that, you know, as the days go past, you know, other things become more clear and other ideas, and then you might have a problem where ideally, like we said in our live recently, and this happened to me in real life, you know, I plan to plant the macadamia, but then you look around you and you can't find 500 macadamia seedlings, you know, and you have to adapt things. So the thing about putting it down on paper, you know, put it down on paper, and, you know, and that's just gonna, it does tend to, you know, be kind of organic the way things evolve, right? As you get closer to the day that you're actually going to plant, with so many factors are involved, right? So many factors, you know, shipping costs, you know, distance to seedling suppliers, and opportunities that come up with other crops that are available as well. Sometimes it might just make more sense. So I'm just saying this because usually, you know, when we put it down on paper, that's not the final article. The final article is when, you know, you've switched on the irrigation and everything's been planted. From the finished article to the first time you put it on paper, it's a long road, and things, you know, so be cool with, you know, scribbling it down or whatever, because tomorrow you're scribbling down something else. Anyway, that's the experience I have. So I find that's quite true.
Okay, good answer. Yeah, I mean, just stick to the principles more than sticking to the sketch, right? And just kind of let the elements flow.
Yeah, to an extent, right? To an extent, obviously, to an extent. You know, you want to plan everything out, you want to have your distance, but there's so many possibilities, isn't it? There's so many possibilities, and then you might find, you know what, I want a few more mahoganies. You know what, I like this, or you know what, that quote I got for that mahogany was a good price. What if I double up on the mahogany? But you know, maybe you're like a week away from planting, and then you know things might just, you have to tweak things like that as well. So you know, as far as projects go, I'm quite open to changing things until it's actually on the ground.
And do you find that, like, you know, the first row of your system ends up looking a lot different from the final row of your system because of that?
No, I do not. No, I do not. I like, you know, I try make, you know, you make a call until I start planting. And then, you know, once I've got that, duplicate that, you know. So I do try find obviously the best with all the information I've gathered and with all the circumstances that have shown up. I'm trying to find the optimum, right? The premium, the best possibility. So once I've found that, I want to.
It's important to understand that although we always say there is no recipe, but that doesn't mean that there are no recipes. Okay, there is no recipe. There are a billion recipes.
That's it. That's it. So I mean, you know, and then you know you can just dance things in. It's like
because you need to be experimenting, and you need to be trying stuff out and changing and adapting, right? But then eventually you're gonna come to that great formation, that great sketch, and say, aha, this one worked nicely. The management is optimal. It's easy to manage. It, you know, the species.
All right. Felipe, you're there?
Looking for multipliable modules, right? We need to be looking for modules that, you know, you've established the sketch, you designed a small module. Okay, this is multipliable and it's scalable. So until you get to that, you need to be open to adaptation. And I think that's, guys, just a quick thing. We need to, because we've got another call right now at 4:30, right, with the sapling group. So what I propose is this: we will. There are another 3 questions that Jack asked. We're gonna go kind of quickly through them, and we're gonna close up the session. Unfortunately, there's not gonna be time to tackle any of the questions from people in YouTube. We're sorry for that, but you know, time is short today. I was gonna say something else, but I forgot. So let's just go right into the. Oh no, I remembered. Jack, you said, could you walk us through a quick design as an example? I'm gonna make a video out of that because I think that's a great topic for a video.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see that. Thank you.
Yeah, cool. All right, so quickly, when planting trees and adding manure to the hole, is it appropriate to fill the hole with 50% manure and 50% soil? Is there such a thing as too much manure? Yes, there is such a thing as too much manure. There is such a thing as too much of anything. It depends on the size of the hole. I find that 50% mixed into the soil is too much. Okay, I'm usually gonna go for like between 20 and 30% maximum, but feel free to make a generous cover of manure on top of the soil, right? So then you can be very generous, and then make sure you cover it with mulch afterwards.
Right? And it so does from different types of manure, it obviously it alters, right? When you have something like horse manure or elephant manure, it tends to be a lot more organic matter. We say elephant because we're dealing with some people out in Thailand, and it's pretty cool. So there's a lot more organic matter, right? And there's other richer manure, which is different material, right? So it can alter a little bit when as well. Take that into consideration.
Jack asked if adding organic material deep in soil is bad because of anaerobic decomposition. Why is root dieback not a problem? But right here off the bat, I would say that roots that die back, they will not decompose anaerobically because they've got pores inside them that will eventually fill up with oxygen. And I don't think that their decomposition is going to be completely anaerobic. And then one other thing, there's always some anaerobic processes going on in the soil, and that's desirable. We want to have a balance between aerobic and anaerobic. So yeah, we don't want to be burying organic matter too much. But you know, roots that die off every now and then, they won't really be a big problem. You know, that's already contemplated in the, you know, in how things work inside the soil. But that's actually a good thing to research. I would think that when roots decompose, it's actually not so much anaerobic because they are exchanging oxygen with the soil all the time. So when they die, you know, there's still going to be some oxygen left, and you know, the soil is very porous around roots, so it's going to be more oxygenated around roots.
I remember one. There are occasions where you do throw things into like tree beds, you know, holes deep down. I remember my very first course with Ernest, we were managing these Mexican sunflowers, and you know, where they were, you know, not organized, and we're actually having to take them out with the hose, the root, and then we're just burying these big roots deep down and just covering. Sometimes you want to eliminate some, just throw it in there, because the rhizome as well is quite rich of brachiata and things like that. Sometimes you remove the big lump of brachiata, you know, it is quite rich as well. Just, you know, on obviously you don't fill it up, but it's what people do, tend to throw things in there as well, no problem. I had a whole load of black velvet bean pods. You know, they went a bit old and, you know, a little bit, it wasn't so nicely dry. I threw so many of them in banana holes, and I think, you know, don't be paranoid about it. Don't be paranoid about it. I think it can serve as material deep down. And then there's
in the last one. Yeah, can you go on, Gennaro? I just got a message that my internet connection is unstable.
Are there any resources, references you recommend for looking up agroforestry characteristics of certain species, like what strata it belongs to? Man, I've seen a few things out on Facebook, nothing that I know of exactly, I'll be honest. You know, there are a lot of these people on Facebook in these groups, and then every so often you come by, you know, I don't know, things like, you know, PDFs and things that I have come across them, but I don't know of a particular resource, to be honest. I know that, you know, the Facebook groups are quite heated discussions, you know, and a lot of people there, you know, quite a lot of technical people there producing this kind of material, but it's more sporadically that I've seen it around, you know, just so sorry,
I think
man.
there are some people trying to come up with a resource in the syntropic agriculture community. I think I saw something like that in the Facebook group. They're trying to come up with a resource, like a compilation of species. You should look it up.
Okay,
it's
cool,
about time somebody did that, man.
Yeah.
But it's important to understand that this is an ongoing building of knowledge. I've seen some lists to which I personally don't agree with a lot. So because everything is based on observation. So even the highest experts in the field, I've heard my teachers, I've heard different things from different teachers that I have. So it's I think it's great to look for these things and to use them as a base, but most important of all, train your eyes and observe, so that you can, use the knowledge that you get from these compilations or from us, talks you have with us, but observe and always question, and ask the plants as they grow if that's their proper stratum or not. They will tell you. That's what I have to say. But check it out. Look it up in the syntropic agriculture community. I'm pretty sure I saw something like that they're coming up with.
Cool. Okay, thank you.
Felipe, we missed a couple of questions at the very beginning from Amar, because we have to click the button and say see more comments, because I think we're already seeing 10 comments, but there were actually 12. There's a couple of questions once.
All right. Yeah. Cool.
You got it. Cool, because Amar took the time to ask, and he said he wasn't going to be available because he's out in India and it's nighttime, but he's probably going to be looking for those answers.
Okay, you wanna take that, Gennaro? Can you read it, and then I'll add comments if.
Yeah. Well, one of his questions was, what are the factors that determine how wide the beds should be and how long? That's it. Well, a lot of the times, if you're mechanizing things, it's usually the machinery determines that. Sometimes, I would like to have my beds, 80 to 90. And what are the factors that, determine that is that you want to jump the bed. You want to be able to step over it without actually having to step on the bed. You see, you want to be able to cross your field, using just the pathways. And if you've got them at a meter 10, you need to be quite healthy. You need to have quite a spring on your jump there to get to the other side, right? If you follow me on that. And also when you're harvesting, you want to be at the corridor and you want to be able to reach over, to halfway on the bed without having to put your knees on it or your other hand to lean to harvest something or manage something. So, it needs to be wide enough so that when you can just reach over at least to halfway in the bed, if you see what I mean? You don't want to be like, otherwise when it's too wide, you tend to have to put your knee on it to reach to the center to harvest or manage or anything like that. And then that means it's too wide. But you do find that sometimes you only have that big tractor for the scale of your project. You've drawn out those big, large beds, and they tend to come at like 110. And then you need to have that spring on your jump, and then you need to really, struggle not to put your knee there to reach the center of the bed, when harvesting something there. So I like to have it 80 to 90 centimeters wide. And how long? I mean, it can be as long, you have the factor of the irrigation, because, sometimes you lose a lot of pressure, and depending on your irrigation, you get, different pressure in the beginning to the end. And that means you've got a different lettuce grown in the beginning of the vegetable bed to the end of it. We say, we like to have corridors every, say, 25 meters, right? If you have corridors at every 25 meters or something, maybe 40 meters, or it could be up to 40 meters, but then, you do break your beds down. If you have a 100-meter bed, you might want to break 2 corridors, kind of like split it into 3. You see what I'm saying? Even if the irrigation tapes, cross that where you step in, because you need to have places sometimes you're with a wheelbarrow and you can't jump over. You need to go to the end to cross with a wheelbarrow to come onto the other bed, right? So I'll say between 25 to 40 meters is a good length until you give it a cut where you have like a pathway where you can walk through, because even when you're jumping, you might have a wheelbarrow that you need to guide through the roads, right? And with drip irrigation,
the length is going to be mostly based on irrigation, like you mentioned, right? And then the harvesting that you mentioned, I think one thing is one measure we can use is you need to be able, like depending on how you're harvesting and carrying it, you should be able to get to make a harvest getting to the middle of the bed and being able to take, you know, half of the bed back to your to your road, to your access path. You know, you should be able to get
Cutting out there. But what he's saying is, you know, you don't want to fill up your box with 20% of your bed, you know, so you have to, you know, go. So you want to at least, you know, fill up your box when you're halfway through your bed, if you see what I'm saying, as you're harvesting. So
yeah, well, exactly, but not necessarily your box, right? Whatever it is that you're using, because maybe you're using like a big wheelbarrow that fits like 3 or 4 boxes. I'm saying, you know,
or a tractor with a little. Yep, cutting out there again. All right, so
no, yeah, but that's the idea.
That's
Last
the idea.
question.
I know you.
So I'm gonna. It's a long question. I'm going to summarize it. He says he you know, he borrowed some money to set up the farm. He needs to start making money quick so that he can quit the job and repay the board money. So he wants to buy grafted plants because yes, you know, plants planted by seed, they will take a bit longer. So he's asking, you know, if I purchase grafted plants and they are low stratum plants, should I not plant some placenta plants and wait for them to grow a little bit before I plant the grafted ready-made plants to give them shade? You could do that. This would, although it would be ideal, it's logistically a problem because it's just so hard to go in the field and plant something. You know, going to be opening up holes in the middle of the field, throwing soil to one side, throwing soil to the other side. And it does make a bit of a mess after you have your placenta plants in place. So what we like to do is we plant everything. We plant the seedlings. We make sure we have some very fast growing plants with the seedlings. I personally use castor beans because, you know, castor beans are going to be giving shade to the plants in a couple of weeks. So that's great. Another thing you can do is to grab some branches from nearby and, you know, stick them around your seedling. Or another thing we like to do is stick some cassava stems around the seedlings, you know, some cassava plants, because they're going to sprout and they're going to quickly give shade to the seedlings. So there are alternatives so that you can have this shade, you know, in a couple of weeks. And you know, that's going to help out because the logistics of planting the seedlings after you have a field established is a bit problematic.
Certainly.
What do you say, Gennaro?
Yeah, definitely. And I find that things grow well together. I appreciate that, you know, it takes a couple of weeks for even those fast growing jack beans and things like that. But it's a blink of an eye. It's a blink of an eye. And in terms of organization, for me, it's a must. I mean, because you get all that mess when you're opening up holes, and I can't imagine doing it with other plants in between, you know. So yeah, I mean, you know, it would be very unorganized to do it, you know, not to plant everything at once. All right, so I think that's it, guys.
Yeah, we need to wrap it up because we got another call now with the saplings here, and people are already asking if we're on. So I'm telling them that we're running 5 minutes late. So, all right, let's wrap it up. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. We're sorry that we couldn't take your questions from YouTube, but do, you know, ask questions in our Facebook group. We every now and then we can answer them there, or in our YouTube videos. We're always trying to answer those questions as well. And without further ado, let's sign out. All right, everybody, cheers. Wayne, Eric, Jack, thanks for being here. It was a pleasure.
Cool. Thank you guys.
Always.
Thank you guys too. See you soon.